Kia ora, Sam. Thanks for joining me. Last time you and I spoke, we were in Wellington at the Pure Advantage and Tane's Tree Trust conference. Things have changed a little, or at least has for you. Tell us about what has happened in the last month for you up there in Tairāwhiti.
Cyclone Gabrielle hit and it wreaked havoc on our river systems, on our sheep and beef farms. The whole tile has really been hit very hard over the last couple of weeks, and we've been working hard in response to get all of our farms back up and running as best we can. Our animals okay, our business is okay, and making sure our people can hang in there, I guess.
Yeah, you've been recording on your Instagram and other places an amazing effort, volunteer effort, a huge effort from landowners and locals. Just summarise, what are you seeing? What's the kind of damage? What's the scale of the damage, Sam?
The river rose very high, covered the place in silt, and also carried with it the slash out of the pine forest, which knocked down everything that sort of sat in its path. So our willow trees, it scoured those off the banks, and where there was infrastructure as well, fence lines and wool sheds and cattle yards and houses, it rammed those with pine slash and filled them up with silt as well. So it's been a pretty large recovery effort. We've got 3 diggers on the ground and a bulldozer going full time at the moment, and a crew of 45 volunteers. Everyone from musterers to people digging stock and people digging out houses.
It's unprecedented in the sense that we haven't had a storm of this scale before, but we've seen slash happen before on the beaches in Tolaga Bay and in Tokomaru Bay. To what extent does this feel like history repeating itself?
To be honest, to me, and I may be outspoken on this, but it feels like finally the spotlight has been shone on this phenomena. Really, here on the East Coast, we're not strangers to pine slash. We're definitely not strangers to large flooding events, and I think the fact that Hawke's Bay got hit exceptionally hard and Tairāwhiti got hit really hard as well, and it affected people's houses and their lives. Really shone the issue on what flooding can do. Because when it's your beach, that's one thing, but when it's your house and your family and people's lives, that's a whole other thing.
It's touched people, hasn't it, in a way that perhaps has brought to home the true impact of forestry management, but also climate change. Would you include that as well?
Yes, it's very difficult to quantify. We've had, in one of the catchments we were working in, we actually had less rain than Bowler. However, we had more damage than Bowler because of the land use practices that were taking place upstream in the upper catchment. So, yeah, I think it's our land management has changed since Bowler. We planted a lot of pines in response to stabilise the landscape, and now we're seeing the landscape was stabilised until we harvested, and now we're seeing the flow-on effects of those harvesting practices. And they may not be contemporary harvesting practices, but we're definitely paying the price for historical harvesting practices.
Well, you need to explain that a bit for us, because not all of us know about forestry practices and land use. So you said something earlier, which I've heard before too, that more trees, more exotic forests were planted in response to Cyclone Bowler. That was in the 80s, wasn't it? So was that a bad thing? Are we now experiencing the consequences of that? Can you explain that?
Yes, the forestry practices were clearfell back in the day, which means take everything, plant right down to the streams, and that left no barrier to catch that pine slash as it washed down off the hill.
In the modern forestry practices, there's not clear felling all the way down to the river edge. There's a margin of land left. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a margin of land. Some people are saying 3 rows of trees. Some people are saying 5 rows of trees are best practice, at the bottom of that hill structure. The other thing to take into account is that there's been figures bandied around that Tairāwhiti soils 80% of it is highly erodible. So depositing anything on a highly erodible landscape is going to wash down into the river because it's going to erode. So unless you've got that root structure in place, it's very difficult to keep that soil on the hill, let alone what sits on top of that soil. So we really need to start taking a good look, in my opinion, at what the future of Tairāwhiti looks like.
I think reading into what you're saying is you're implying that a different kind of land use might be required. Are you thinking, for instance, of native forest as an alternative to pine trees?
It's a really complex situation because at the one hand, it's got to be commercially viable, right? And so as a community, we are probably not going to make the transition from harvestable pine plantation to anything else in that really steep country unless there's something else that's going to pay the bills. Because in a lot of cases, these are trust organizations with multiple shareholders that need dividends out of that. So to me, it doesn't matter what, it does matter what the land use is that we transition from pine to, but it does have to pay the bills.
Economics matters.
There's a lot of people employed in forestry.
Just one last question, Sam. I suppose you really haven't had much chance to get up into the native bush, but if you have, what's the state of that? How did the native stands, what was there, how has that stood up to Cyclone Gabrielle?
It's actually quite amazing, eh? I've been up twice, mostly to get just some headspace from the work we're doing, but I've been up twice. I run a big 30,000 hectare conservation project, as well as I've been up to a couple of other bush blocks, and it's just untouched. It's ridiculous, yes, we can see the signs of where the water level in the rivers have come high, but we're not seeing that erosion. We're not seeing that bank erosion because the trees are there stabilizing the banks, and we're not seeing the big scarring on hillsides either, which is absolutely fascinating, because you can see really clearly the three types of land use, if you want to call it that. You can see your sheep and beef country, which in our region, there's been slippage, but not to the same degree that Hawke's Bay has experienced it. But then you see the pine, and then you see the native, and the native's held up really well. It's pretty incredible to see how resilient landscapes can be in the most steep and highly erodible country if you've got that canopy cover.
I know it's too early to say, but if only there was a way to join the economics with the native ngāhere, we might be onto something, Sam.
It's a no-brainer, really. We've got to figure out, because in the steep country, there's only one real land use that makes sense, and that's permanent forest. It's just how we've got to figure out the way of making it pay.
Sam, we really appreciate your time. We know you're busy doing great work. Kia ora, and thanks so much. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thanks, Vince. Appreciate you. Appreciate everything you guys do. And talk soon.